All right, welcome to my podcast, Conversations with My Friends in AI. My name is Claire Longo. I am your host, and we have an amazing guest on the show today, Kyle. Kyle is here today because he wrote a book. He's a published author. You can find him on Amazon. He's got a page and everything. There it is. I have it too.
Lovely. Wow. Look, they're friends.
Look at that. They match. He also has an incredible marketing campaign strategy for this book that we will talk through. This was like yesterday. So first of all, is this you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay, tell us why you do this.
I just I don't know when the idea struck me, but
Yeah.
the O'Reilly marketing person emailed me when the book went to production or whatever and was being written and launched. She was like, "Oh, here's your your marketing options, whatever." And after writing the book for so long, I was so stoked just to entertain myself and do fun things with it.
Yeah.
So I don't know when the idea crossed my mind to personify the book and make it my child. But but yesterday I took it snowboarding. I've taken it to baseball games, other stuff
Here,
like
I've got
that.
some examples up.
Yeah.
I think this is the first one I saw, and I was like, "Why is he feeding this book?" No, my first thought, I didn't know you'd written a book, so I was like, "Oh my God, Kyle wrote a book," and I was like, "Is he okay? Is he lonely? Why is he taking it everywhere?"
Yeah, no, fortunately there's precedence now, and I feel like everyone just kind of has seen it multiple times and gets it. But...
Now we know what's up. No, yeah, I'm always excited. I feel like I'm just following you on this journey. I'm just excited to see where you take it next.
Yeah, right. It's like one of those Instagram accounts where a girl leads your boyfriend around the world by the hand kind of thing. But it's just
you've got a book. Oh, there's
me and whatever. Oh yeah, it's like the little puppy. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cute.
Right, isn't that adorable?
That's like my dog. She's eaten a lot of my books.
Really?
Well, you can tell when I've really read a book because I'll have it out a lot, and so she'll get it. So any book that's been eaten by my dog, you can tell I read that one. Oh, that's so cute.
I know, it's adorable.
What else we got?
Yeah, I just try and think of funny things to do. Yeah, that's when I was in Japan. We took it to the monkey park outside Kyoto.
Wow.
And read it to the monkeys, gauge their expressions.
Do you think that was helpful? Are they ready to now put a model into production?
Yeah, we're starting a small company of new engineers.
That's fantastic.
And yeah, I took it to the ninja house and to samurai training and other stuff like that.
Wow, okay. This book has been around the world. I love it. Where's it going next?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to Banff snowboarding in January and Telluride in February. So those might be the
Colorado.
ones. Yeah. If I can still push the snowboarding factor. I did learn that they aren't very weatherproof. So I had it in the pouch of my snow pants. The first thing I do is hit a jump and it immediately just flies out.
Oh, that's awesome. I wish you got that on camera.
I wish I did too. I was like, oh, it'll stay. It's fine. It was in there. It was not in there at all. But yeah, those are the next places we'll go, or until I'm struck by a new funny thought on something that would deem the book a person kind of thing.
It's amazing. So, and Kyle, walk us through kind of your career path, how you got into machine learning and kind of the career steps you've made along the way.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. What's up, Joe? I'm Kyle. So I've had somewhat of a semi-traditional or untraditional path, I guess you should say, through the machine learning space. I started off kind of pivoting to data science from molecular biology. So I was getting my master's in molecular and cellular biology, ended up as a data analyst at a small biotech company. And from there, I really wanted a more formal education in data science. So I went to New York City Data Science Academy for 3 months, full-time boot camp program.
Yeah.
And out of there, I started as a data scientist at the company Pfizer. From there on out, I kind of delved more and more towards the software engineering side of data science. So I became a machine learning engineer after a year and a half. And then after a year and a half of that, I went to Etsy, where I was kind of a software engineer, machine learning, basically a platform DevOps, MLOPS engineer for machine learning.
Very cool. Tell me a little bit about that transition from data science to machine learning engineer. What kind of inspired that?
Yeah, I'd say it was two things. One was the actual business need. I think there was a lot of acknowledgement that there was trouble getting models into production, and we could operationalize things better and faster. You always hear the oh, it takes us 4 months to get a model into production thing.
Why? Why does it take 4 months? I want click of the button, give me that 5-minute deployment dream.
Exactly. So we knew that was possible. And the second part was just interest. I've always gravitated towards the software engineering side of everything more so than like the stats side of stuff. And I'm definitely better at it. So I kind of naturally would just look stuff up, get interested in it, and eventually became like the point person for like MLOps on the team.
I think that's awesome because I find some of the best like MLOps people have a very strong background in data science itself, like have been a data scientist, because you're feeling that pain of like being a data scientist. It's like, how do I get my model out of my Jupyter notebook and into production so the business can actually use it? I feel like a few of us just went in the direction of like, we're just going to solve that problem, become engineers. So it's really kind of cool to see that career path. But to start with, we're going to talk through just kind of some content in the book and everything. I did share this book with my entire engineering team and product team. And the reason for that is like at my current company, we are building software that is like part of a machine learning platform. And so there's like core machine learning concepts that need to be kind of baked into that platform. And Kyle's book is like, yeah, it's a great reference, right? Like you want to copy and paste code out of here for sure. But also it's like, these are like industry best practices in terms of like how you handle like data in terms of like that categorical data, time series data. Those are a little tricky. Um, but yeah, let's dive in. I would love to hear a little bit about your book, why you wrote it, why it's so important, and who should really have it on their bookshelf.
For sure. So first off, I'll say that I co-authored it and co-authored the
That's true.
second edition.
That's true.
Yeah. So
It
the
still
first
counts,
edition,
Kyle.
thank you. The first edition was written by Chris Albon in like
Yeah.
2018, and I was gratefully asked to do the second edition, which involves making a lot of edits, writing new chapters, deleting chapters, that kind of stuff. But it's really written as like all O'Reilly cookbook type books are, as a coffee table reference for anything that you want to accomplish within a given space. So the purpose of this book, as written, is to contain a bunch of what they literally call recipes, which are little self-contained snippets that you should be able to copy and paste and run, and then easily adapt for more specific use cases for whatever you want to accomplish in your business, personal, whatever.
Yeah, very cool. In terms of like target audience, like who is this book going to help the most? Like, should this be for data scientists, machine learning engineers, everybody?
Yeah, I would say it's probably most helpful for folks who have some Python experience and either already know some of the theoretical aspects of machine learning, but want to get more into the practical side of things. Look, while anyone who's familiar with code should be able to pick it up and understand what's going on, there's not like a deep explanation of the like statistical theory behind the machine learning in the book. It's really more of like a, hey, here's like what we're accomplishing and here's how to do it in Python.
Yeah, this is going to help you kind of like get your code in working condition really quickly. I like it.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay, so you did something very challenging. You wrote a book or co-authored a book um, for like a topic that is literally like it's changing under our feet. It is developing probably as we speak, it's changing just that area of machine learning, AI. What was that kind of like trying to stay on top of like the latest topics in machine learning and also like writing kind of the user's manual for it at the same time?
It was really challenging for especially the second half of the book. The first half focuses on what folks typically call, like classic machine learning stuff, like linear regression, which hasn't changed dramatically, either
Yeah,
from
that
a
one's not
theoretical
going anywhere,
standpoint.
is it?
What?
That one's not going anywhere, linear regression.
Exactly, not anytime soon. So the first half was fairly static in that regard, where both the code and the theory haven't changed much at all. But as you get later and later in the book, start to delve into more advanced concepts. And once you hit the deep learning part of the book, that's where I was like, I had to make a lot of fairly tough decisions on what to include and how to include it. Do I
Yeah.
use PyTorch or TensorFlow? What version of these libraries do I use? What recipes do I use that will be, that might go out of date in like 2 months versus like 2 years?
Right.
And so a lot of critical thinking there.
Gotcha, yeah. So the other thing I noticed about the book is it's similar to some of like the tutorials that I'm making for people these days where the code is very copy pasty. Like you could just grab the code out of the book, out of tutorials and get it running on kind of your own data very quickly. So I've learned that developers like samples of code they can copy paste. And you were talking a little bit about that as well to kind of hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, no, it's kind of it's funny you put it that way because it definitely makes me look at it kind of as the developer advocate of like books in
Yes.
that way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
it's meant to enable folks to get stuff working quickly, be it, Stack Overflow or like just a well-written quick start kind of thing.
Yep.
And yeah, that's the whole purpose of it, right? Like nothing in here there's not many super long recipes in here, or recipes that are like, here's how you accomplish 8 different things at the same time. It's all like, here's one specific thing you want to accomplish, and it's written to be rerunnable and copy paste so that you don't even have to question whether or not it's going to work. It's just going to work.
Yeah. Okay. And then you were mentioning earlier, you're talking about O'Reilly's code explainability tool. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. So if you go on learning.o'reilly.com, and so if you look through this example recipe, you can see basically buttons on top of every single code sample. There's one that says explain this code, and one that says translate this code into like a target language, be it C or R or Ruby or Rust or Scala. If you click explain this code, you get a nice little LLM-based AI explanation of what's actually going on in the code itself, which is really cool, because in addition to the surrounding text within the book, which is meant to give a little bit of a description, the code explanation goes kind of in depth into line by line what's going on within that given code snippet, so you can understand it better and build on it. With the translator, to translate it into a target language, you can basically say, oh, I really like this snippet, but I wish it were written in R using, dplyr instead of pandas, for instance. And that's a great way to basically take a code snippet from this book and then make it reusable for your R project or your Scala Spark ML project or something like that.
That is smart. That is a really cool example showing how like ChatGPT kind of tools, LLMs, can be used to help write code. Because that is like my big question in my head right now is like, what is the best way to leverage these like large language models when writing code? And you're showing a pretty interesting example here. In general, when you think about the workflow of like writing code or even like for your own personal workflow, how are you working with these kind of more modern tools like ChatGPT?
Yeah, I use both ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot.
Yeah.
Uh, like ChatGPT is just great for, it's like your code pairing buddy, right? You paste some starter code, or you say generate some starter code, and then you kind of, slowly back and forth through either further prompts or basically what you want, like refine it with ChatGPT to say like, all right, like give me a script that does this. And you look at the script, you're like, well, this and this might not work. Like break these things out into functions, do this. Similar thing with Copilot, where I'm always doing that to refactor code or make changes that I know I'm capable of doing and know exactly what I want, but it's going to take me time to do. And to explain it to, an LLM powered chat tool is just going to accelerate my workflow dramatically, as
It's
opposed to like
making you a
writing.
lot more efficient, because I think the danger of it is I can say like, hey, ChatGPT, like write this code that does this thing. And then if I'm not looking critically at the output of that, like it's not always going to get it right. It's not going to be right for my data or my use case. So I think there's kind of like an iterative process here of like really understand what it's outputting and like tweaking it properly. It's making us more efficient, which I'm all about. I don't think our jobs are going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
I think it's a tool like anything else, and you can use it like a blind copy paste tool, but if you don't know what you want or are looking for, that's only going to get you so far. And if you're asked one question about it, it's going to become pretty clear very quickly that you don't understand what it's doing.
Yeah, it's
Which
the
in
same
some
thing like
cases,
copy paste from Stack Exchange. If someone asks you questions, you didn't take time to understand it, like you're not going to be able
yeah, you
to.
literally, I mean,
So
yeah, I've written code before where I just, in a comment, put the link to the Stack Overflow thing where I got
there
it
you
from.
go.
This is where this came from. It works. Like, but we don't have time to delve into this right now. We'll revisit that later.
Yep. Yep. I think that's called tech debt. That's a new kind of tech debt.
Yeah, exactly. Just
Citing your
references
sources.
to yeah,
That's right.
generated copied code that needs to be broken down at some point.
That's awesome. Well, let's dive into the book content. First thing, let's talk about kind of that deep learning chapter, like choosing the right deep learning framework. I know that's a chapter you spent a lot of time with. Just kind of talk us through that.
Yeah, so there's one chapter 20, where I kind of do a whole thing on tensors with PyTorch.
Yeah.
And this was really fun because it was basically rewriting chapter 1, which is like arrays in NumPy, but showing how to do the same thing in PyTorch. But when I was thinking about the structure of chapters, I was back and forth a lot on PyTorch or TensorFlow. And so I
Yeah,
was just
the
like,
age-old question, right?
literally, yeah, I know, I'm so sick of it, and I hated having to ask it myself. Um, but it was a big question of what's going to be the most useful thing 2 years from now, or what are folks going to be most interested in 2 years from now when reading this book. And PyTorch has clearly grown not only from popularity with researchers and other folks, but also in production settings. I'm starting to see PyTorch be as pervasive as TensorFlow, and as ubiquitous in machine learning, like in production systems. And so
Okay.
based on PyTorch's growth, I was like, this is going to be I think the right call, looking ahead 2 years.
Yeah, and if it's not, we can always use ChatGPT to translate it, so I'm not too worried. But no, I think that makes sense. It's interesting to hear that you're seeing it more in production systems. By the way, I have a cold, so here we are.
Yeah.
It's that time of year. No, that makes sense. So kind of drawing from your experience, I'd love to hear, like, as you're writing this book, how kind of your experience with like code and production, how that kind of influenced your approach to what you chose to include and all that.
Yeah, definitely. So it kind of helped inform the addition of a lot of like different recipes throughout the book. Everything from the actual like data loading chapter, where I was adding new formats that weren't in there before, like Parquet or like other binary data
I
formats, like
love a good
Java.
Parquet file.
Exactly. Yeah. Things that I like frequently work with in production,
Good, yeah.
that aren't typically part of your, ML quick start where you have a CSV or a small data frame kind of thing. So I added a lot of that stuff into there. But I also included things like in the K nearest neighbors chapter, adding like an approximate nearest neighbors solution using the Facebook FICE library. So that's the typical kind of scalable approach I see to, nearest neighbors at scale, candidate fetching, or any kind of embedding based similarity tool.
Yeah. Okay. So I like what you're saying. So that last point about like scalability, like that is a production focus. Like when I'm tinkering in a Jupyter notebook, I'm not thinking so much about scale. Sometimes I am, I should be. But sometimes I'm not. And then when you move that model into production, it's like, okay, great. I wrote this code that like works in terms of like a great accurate model, but let's actually scale that. So that's definitely like when you've been in the trenches putting machine learning models into production, you kind of start to think about scale a lot. The other thing you mentioned was like my favorite debate, Parquet versus CSV. I don't even think it's a debate, honestly. Like, don't use CSV in production. Like, it doesn't like store the data types. And so when you like save it and try to load it back in, I've just seen this so many times where we're just like losing important information about that data. And so that's why I turned to Parquet in production. Is that kind of the experience that you've seen as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, CSVs are great in that they're easily, human readable data formats that you can just like view in a window or crack open without thinking about it.
I know I shouldn't knock them. I'm always knocking them, but
Yeah, I
they
know,
have
but
their
like, yeah,
place.
it's definitely easy to hate on them. But like any
I
kind of
know.
binary data format that is also, comes with a schema and types is going to be more efficient at scale. It's going to save you space because it's a binary data format.
Yeah,
And it's going to be, save you from a lot of different errors because you have a very structured schema that prevents you losing information or changing types haphazardly, like you would typically do with some kind of just simple CSV or tab separated file.
totally. And I know we're getting like so in the technical weeds right now, but like honestly,
But
this
yeah,
is something I've seen in production. And like you do it a few times, you use a CSV file in production, you're like, why are my data types not right? And then you figure out and you start using parquets. Like I feel like that's the story for so many folks.
oh, I definitely imagine that it is. And
Yeah.
Parquet is not the only data format like that or like data storage format like that, but yeah, there's different
Mhm.
different formats for different levels of scale that are gonna, have trade-offs.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is my favorite chapter, honestly. I know it's like maybe it's not it's my favorite because it's like kind of these patterns we're talking about. It's just like getting the data types right. And there's stuff about missing values, there's stuff about ordinal versus what is the word nominal. So like an
Yeah.
ordinal categorical variable, like the order of it matters. So it's like not numeric, but there's an order in which these things go and you want your models to like pick up that order. And this is something that like I feel is so important when you're like putting machine learning models into production because it's just like these little nuances of like the data and the format that really can impact things. So I was really happy. I was going through your book. I didn't read it cover to cover, but I saw that chapter. I was like, oh my gosh, he covered my favorite thing. I was so happy.
Yeah, no, and this is where I have to give like such a huge shout out to Chris. Like, I imagine there are some books where you pick it up for a second edition as an author editor, and
Yeah.
you have to like really egregiously change a lot of stuff and rewrite it. The first edition, even like though it's now out of date, just from both a code perspective and with this version, was still fantastic. And I was so grateful to be able to build in the back of everything that Chris did. Like, I use this as a reference for myself because
So cool.
occasionally if I'm like teaching something or like need to help out like a student, I still mentor at the Data Science Academy. I'll send them a snippet from this and be like, oh, I think Chris wrote like a really, really great recipe for that from handling categorical data. That is just so perfect and captures that realm like both entirely and has a lot of longevity.
Yeah, it's core concepts. Like I think those core concepts are not going anywhere. Like sure there might be like more and more efficient ways to like approach them as the field advances, but those core concepts, like I'm really happy to see it in here. It made me very happy.
It's so
You
fun.
mentioned Data Science Academy though. I want to circle back to that really quickly because you still mentor there. You did go through that academy as like a boot camp. And I'd love to kind of hear about your experience with that because I feel like so many people ask me like, is a data scientist boot camp worth it? And I'd love to just answer that once and for all. I think the answer is yes. Like I've seen some really great people come out of those boot camps and just know like the right core concepts. I'd love to kind of hear about your experience with that.
Yeah, my experience with the data science like bootcamp is that it's one definitely worth it if you're willing to put in the work. I think like
Yeah.
all education or all things you do, you definitely get out of it what you put in. And if you do truly love like data science and want to work in it, then a data science bootcamp is going to give you the education, the connections, the environment and culture to surround
And there's a
yourself with.
networking aspect, isn't there? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. To just like meet folks and talk about this stuff every day and immerse yourself more in the field. So I always say that like the data science bootcamp that I went to gave me everything that I needed to start my career. Now,
Mhm.
almost immediately, I started learning more in an enterprise setting. But I used materials from the data science bootcamp at Pfizer all the time as reference points for solving
Wow.
problems, much like I used this book. So, so yeah, I would definitely say it was a very valuable experience for me.
Very cool. And then you continued to kind of mentor and I think teach some courses there as well. What kind of led to that?
Yeah, I've long been a mentor there just because, I mean, when you graduated looking for a job, you're not doing anything. And I was like, yeah, I would
Mhm.
love to, make cash on the side, just helping folks out with what I struggled through as well.
Totally.
But as I got more industry experience, I definitely felt like there were things that I was better positioned to teach. So now I teach a course that I do for them called like designing production machine learning systems. And it's really fun. It's all like building scalable systems on like Google Cloud, deploying models, building automatically scheduled model pipelines,
Yes.
building feature stores and that kind of stuff. And it's super fun because it one feels like a unique education space that isn't really well penetrated at the moment.
Uh-huh.
Um, and yeah, it's just up the space that I work a lot in, and I'm very
Yeah.
comfortable.
I feel like there's so much value from just like experience putting models in production at an enterprise company. Like you don't know all the nuances of what could go wrong with your model until you've actually done that. And like you mentioned, I do think there's an education gap here. I think in a lot of kind of like programs today, or just people who become data scientists, I see there's a little bit of a gap in knowledge in terms of just like those production best practices. And so that's something that I'm really trying to help folks fill, like those core concepts that we need to understand when we put those models in production. I don't think we can anticipate everything that could go wrong with them, but there's like some best practices we can do to kind of make sure that we do catch it when it does happen.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing is like there's no substitute for experience here. But
Sure.
part of the goal of the course is to give folks enough like breadth of experience with different tools and systems and even like model deployment paradigms that they're better positioned to make decisions on those trade-offs. Like I'm like, all right, so for instance, when deploying a model to make predictions, like do you want to do it in batch offline or like in a real-time service online.
Yes.
Like here's the trade-off between both. Here are the instances where you might choose one or the other, much like choosing a machine learning algorithm for a given problem. And here are the things that should inform your final decision when you like make a recommendation to build one or the other for your use case.
100%. Yeah, it's that batch versus real time. I see that discussion a lot. Have you seen many real time systems in your career? I just see a lot of batch because I often find that we just can't justify the cost and complexity of real time for a lot of use cases.
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, like Etsy is a lot of real-time stuff.
Yeah,
It depends on the company or use case. Like most places doing search or recommendations, I think, are moving to real time just
that's where
because
you're going to see those real time needs.
yeah, it's going to see those benefits. And also, depending on how you're doing batch, it could be potentially more expensive. Like if you in
Sure.
real time, you're only making a prediction for the user typing, but in batch offline, you don't know who's going to be online tomorrow. So if you try
Ah,
and
you
pre-compute
can't
predictions
pre-compute
for
and store that.
every single person,
Yeah.
yeah, then that's going to be really, really expensive. If you
Okay.
limit daily active users and that's smaller, but again, tools of the trade-off, it's a lot of different,
Yeah.
a lot
No,
of
that's a
different.
great example. Yeah, because I would think like, oh, you do batch pre-compute, but no, you'd be pre-computing way more than you actually need to. So you got to move to real time there.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and you can always pre-compute less and be more cognizant. There's trade-offs. You can mix things, but yeah, that's one of the many
Yeah,
one of the many things that might inform that decision.
very cool. All right, we're getting real nerdy here. I love it. Um, I want to hear a little bit more about that process of writing a technical book. Like your book is not just words, it's a lot of code actually. So I'd love to hear about kind of like your approach for creating that kind of like technical content in a book.
Yeah. So I was provided with the first edition Git repo. So that's what
Yeah,
it came out as a Git repo. So all of the chapters themselves written in like ACI doc or AC ASCII, whatever.
yeah.
And my first instinct as a software engineer was to clone it locally, crack open Visual Studio Code, and like literally write like just
See, this is the
everything.
thing. I don't know if you were like writing a book or just writing code, dude.
That was
Probably
how
didn't
I
feel that
approached.
different.
Exactly. So I like I am probably one of the few people who does this in my understanding. But I was like making branches and like opening PRs and sending them to
Version
Chris for
control.
review. Yeah, exactly. I don't think it was a very common O'Reilly book approach. But it worked really well for me where I just make a new branch and open a PR for a given chapter. Do a bunch of stuff there and then send it off to like review for Chris or just like even just like a quick check on like
Yeah.
that's okay. But I did come up with a cool process by which I found this little npm or like library that turns ASCII docs into like Python notebooks. And so I would literally just generate a Python notebook from the chapter, spin up a little Docker notebook server,
Huh?
run the code to validate it, and do most of my development kind of like that as I came up with new recipes.
Hell yeah, that's so cool. That is how a machine learning engineer writes a book.
Absolutely.
Of course you
Um,
did.
I think it does vary though. I like was speaking with
Sure.
another author at my previous company, and I was like, "Did you also have like an ACE like ASCII doc like
Yeah.
repository you worked out of?" He's like, "Dude, we worked in a Google Doc." So
That's
I think it,
wild.
yes, I think it varies depending on the source material, author's
Sure.
preferences, that kind of stuff.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Okay. And then tell me a little bit about writing a book and also working full time. Prioritization and time management is no easy task, I think, in our industry. How did you approach that?
Yeah, it was you know, by the same thing I always do, just procrastinating sometimes and then setting aside large blocks of time other times to like really sit down and kind of bang out a couple of chapters.
Right.
There were times where I was definitely way ahead because some chapters stood the test of time, shout out to Chris again. And there was a limited amount of editing that I had to do to get it, get the APIs working again with the latest version of scikit-learn or something. Um, at the same time, there were chapters I had to write from scratch, and I wanted to give myself like more than the average amount of time for that. So I think the first timeline we came up with was like 2 weeks a chapter, and I would occasionally get ahead by 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but then use that extra time to like write a chapter that I knew was going to take me a longer amount of time based on the proposed edits.
Gotcha. Did you ever experience writer's block?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I especially when choosing like a given recipe or something like that. I mean, one is the aspect of getting the recipe working, which can be frustrating if it's a more complex one. Even as the author, sometimes I'm like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, dude, why isn't this PyTorch code like working the way it should be?
Sure.
But there are other times where I just like would stare at a chapter, flip back and through, and be like, what is this missing? What recipe, is industry standard that should be included here that folks are going to love to have in this book or think that it's missing if it's not there. And that took a lot of time. There were times I would just crack open my computer, stare at a chapter for an hour, write nothing, and then close it and be like, I can't do this right now.
Yeah. Okay. That's like how I imagine like a true writer. That's just a day in the life. But
Exactly. Yeah, I would joke that I was like, I was traveling a lot when I was writing it too.
yeah.
So I would be like, in Barcelona on like a balcony drinking wine with like my computer open, trying to get like inspiration from the people in the street to
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
You're like the
to better
Stephen
write
King, but
something.
of machine learning, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah, there are some chapters that are probably more poetic than others based on what my mindset was when I wrote that.
Poetry and code. I love it. Well, tell us some fun stories from writing the book. Do you have any like kind of like fun experiences to share, or, like funny moments?
Yeah, the funniest one was definitely when I finished like all of the PyTorch chapters, and then 2 days later, PyTorch 2.0 was announced and dropped. Um,
Oh shit, dude.
yeah, so that
Did
was
you
like
not see that one coming?
I did not see that one
Oh
coming. I think,
no.
yeah. Fortunately, I had plenty of time to change it.
Yeah.
And again, shout out to PyTorch here. The 2.0 change did not have like a big effect on their actual API. They had like a torch.compile thing,
Yeah.
that, like speeds up the like the neural network fundamentally. And so all I had to do was add like one line of code to like like 80% of the recipes. But for a minute there, I was super worried it was going to be like a TensorFlow 1-2 thing, and I was going to have to like change everything in every chapter.
You'd already written all of it.
Yeah,
Oh man.
yeah,
That's fun. That's a
yep.
fun moment.
Yeah, that's what happens in the landscape is just, changing under your feet and trying to write
It
a book
really
on
is,
machine learning during an AI boom.
for sure. Yeah, it's an interesting time we're in for sure. Not complaining though, it definitely makes us relevant. So no complaints.
Yeah, I like being relevant.
Right? Yeah, it's helpful. Okay, this is the question I've been burning to ask you. You have a very creative promotional like marketing campaign approach for your book. And I can actually share a screen and like show some of my favorite posts that you've made. And I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about your strategy here because it's just such a fun way to promote a book. It just looks like you're having a ton of fun. Well, Kyle, those are all the questions I had for you. Is there anything you want to leave us with? Any additional things we should cover that maybe I didn't ask about? Anything we should know about writing a technical book?
Um, if I would just recommend if have an idea for a book, there's no harm in either putting a proposal together or just starting to
Yeah.
write it. The worst thing that happens is you end up with something open source that others learn from in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Okay.
So the only way I got into writing just by writing on Medium, writing ad hoc blogs, and now I'm technically a book author. And so just starting to write is the best way to get into it if you're interested.
I
The
love
other
that.
thing I will say is that it's not advice or anything like that, but I have a couple extra copies floating around. So if you want to do any kind of promotion or raffle where someone wins a book and we mail it to them,
Ooh.
you are also welcome to do that.
Let's do that. Let's do some kind of promotion or raffle. I'll think of something. We can put it up, maybe on LinkedIn. That would be amazing
Yeah,
to get your book into a few other
yeah, like
people's hands. Yeah,
yeah.
and maybe you can take it on adventures too. I would love to see where they take it.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. So
That
I'll
would
be
be
like,
awesome.
maybe it'll be like a write-in thing, like like where would you take the book, and
Yes.
the highest voted answer. Yes.
Okay, that's what it is. We're gonna make a LinkedIn post, and it's where you're gonna take it, and then highest upvoted. We'll send it. Sound
Yeah,
good?
something like that. That
Something
sounds
like that.
great.
Okay.
And that's so funny.
I love it. That would be hilarious. Well, I'm going to take it a few places, so keep an eye on my LinkedIn. I've got some fun ideas here. It'll be
Cool.
really
I'm so
cool.
excited. Thank you so much for, making sure they get out there and see the world.
Of course, of course. And thanks for taking us kind of through the journey of like writing a book. I think this is really cool perspective to hear from someone like very technical that's also really contributed and become like a published author. And I love what you're saying about Medium. Like I'm publishing blogs on Medium all the time. And like I can agree with what you're saying. Like just writing stuff down as you're learning it, I think helps. And I see a lot of people using it for that. And also just kind of like builds your resume. Like if you're applying for a job and people are Googling you, like here's everything I know about AI image generation, and they already know that. And so I think that kind of helps in terms of like building like that portfolio too.
I completely agree. Like nothing forces you to become a domain expert, like publicly giving advice on it. You
100%.
inherently kind of like check everything that you do to make sure you're not saying anything stupid or wrong or something like
That's
that.
the
And
hard
so,
part. Yeah.
yeah, so I often learn a lot through the process of writing and then
Yes.
end up with something great for my resume or website or whatever. Yeah.
You learn a lot, and I don't want people to feel like, oh, I can't publish that because like I don't know if I'm right. Like you'll figure out if you're right and you can iterate
Yeah,
on stuff.
exactly.
It kind of puts
Just
you under a little bit of pressure and helps you learn. Yeah.
it does, yeah. I've like done that many times before. I'm just gonna put stupid ideas for something and sat down and written an article in like an hour because I was like, can I accomplish this with code? And I
Yeah,
could. And then I just turned that into an article and it usually ends up filling some space that wasn't filled there before or something.
totally. Well, Kyle, thank you so much. That's all I had for you, but thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on as a guest. It was a real pleasure.
Of course. Bye, everyone.